During the campaign, I committed to finding 4 cents on every dollar that we spend. We're doing our part. Now we need the large urban municipalities and the district school boards to do what we did and find 4%. Find 4 cents on every dollar they spend. So our government will pay for independent experts who can look at the books line by line, just like we did.
The Ontario government says it will pay municipal governments and large school boards to review their budgets in order to find savings. Premier Doug Ford says the reviews are needed to help the province tackle its $11.7 billion deficit and debt that sits at around $347 billion. The offer to pay for third-party audits comes as municipalities and school boards, though, have been warning provincial cuts will mean layoffs and service reductions or forced tax hikes. Cam Guthrie is the mayor of Guelph, Ontario, and he joins me via Skype. Hi, Mayor. Nice to see you.
Hi, you as well. Thanks for having me.
You tweeted today that Premier Ford's request that large urban municipalities and school boards find 4 cents on every dollar of savings would mean about a $19 million budget cut for Guelph. Can you expand on that? What do you anticipate that would mean in terms of people in Guelph?
Well, that's really the big question here. If he is indicating that municipalities or even school boards are trying to find 4 cents on every dollar, that equates to $19 million for Guelph. So what does that mean? Does that mean less plowing of the roads or not cutting the grass on our sports fields? Or does that mean less police? And you know, it goes on. And those are the types of conversations that we would have to have with our residents here. But I don't have residents banging down the doors saying that they want less services. And if that's really what it comes down to, then it's either going to be increased taxes or cutting of services.
So the Premier and his government seem to indicate that they were looking for efficiencies, like what they're saying that's what they did with their budget and that's what municipalities can do instead of cutting services to look at efficiencies. Do you think there is 4 cents on every dollar in efficiencies that you could potentially look at cutting?
Well, the problem I have right off the bat is the definition of efficiencies, because everywhere else in the world, what's actually been happening from the upper level of government, from the provincial government, is what's called cuts. So I find it disingenuous to say that they are finding efficiencies when really what they're doing is cutting, and in fact they're downloading a lot of the stuff that they had at their level of government down to municipalities, and they're resting it on the taxpayers on the local level. But then they're out in front of the cameras saying, well, we found efficiencies. Those aren't efficiencies, those are cuts. And so I think I would ask respectfully back to the Premier, what exactly, how are you defining efficiencies and how are you defining cuts? Because there's obviously a disconnect there.
And when you say downloading and cuts, what kinds of things have you seen as the mayor? What is, so far, what is affecting Guelph?
Well, so far we're looking at there's our public health, which we share with 2 other municipalities. We're looking at upwards to $3 million there alone. And also with the gas tax that was supposed to be doubled, which was promised by the government, that never showed up for municipalities across the province. You're looking at millions of dollars over 10 years that many municipalities, including Guelph, are going to be looking for. And it seems like we're on this treadmill of every other day a new cut is coming out. And so you have cities that are trying to respond and also staff members that are trying to respond to all these different cuts that are coming every other day.
Do you have any recourse? Like, is there anything that you can do as mayor, or I know you've spoken to some other mayors, but is there, I know Mayor Tory, for example, has sent a letter saying just can we put this discussion off for a bit until at least next year's budget and we can figure things out then? What recourse do you have?
Well, that just seems very reasonable. One of the things that has bothered me and some other mayors is that a lot of these cuts that are coming from the province are being retroactive after the fact that we've already set our budgets. Municipalities are on a completely different fiscal calendar than the province, and many of the members of the government, including the Premier, come from a municipal background, so they should know that already. And so the fact that they're trying to impose these cuts on us and now trying to say, well, just find efficiencies that are already retroactive back to the beginning of the year, it's not courteous in the way that this is coming together. So myself, Mayor Tory, and others, we're saying, look, we realize the financial situation that you're in. We get it. And we want to partner with you in a respectful way moving forward. To do that, pause, stop for a little bit. Let's figure out how we can get together and discuss what our next steps are together. And we'll try to get something together maybe for the beginning of next year. That seems reasonable. Everyone I talk to says that's a reasonable thing to do. But today's announcement and trying to find efficiencies does not even address the retroactive issue that many municipalities are facing.
Have you had a chance to communicate that to any member of the government?
Well, I am the large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario chair, so officially under that role, which represents 28 mayors, 67% of the population of Ontario, we did send a letter a couple of weeks ago outlining our concerns. We do actually have a meeting of the caucus along with Minister Clark of Municipal Affairs that will be meeting with us face-to-face on Friday. And we look forward to talking about not only the issues we had previous to today's announcement, but obviously we have a lot of questions. The devil is in the details, as they say, in regards to the announcement made by the Premier today.
Do you have some optimism that there could be any movement? And I ask because obviously there have been a lot of questions for the government over the past few weeks about the impact of their decisions in their budget, the sort of after the budget impacts, I guess you could call them. Do you have any level of optimism that they will change their mind on any of this? They've talked a lot about the deficit that they were left with and the reason that they're making these decisions. Might they backtrack on that?
Well, when we sent the letter, the large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario sent our letter a couple of weeks ago, we did receive, it was done through the media, but we did receive a response from the government saying, no, they will not stop what they're doing. We're not going to let up as the large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, myself as the mayor of Guelph. We need to communicate to them, again, that we respectfully want to work with them on the situation that they're in. But there are better ways of going about this, and it starts with creating a non-confrontational relationship. You know, they got the rest of their term in front of them. We got the rest of the term for us mayors as well for the next few years. Let's have a good relationship moving forward to figure out how we can move forward together instead of having these cuts imposed on us with really no discussion at all.
All right. Thank you so much, Mayor Guthrie. Appreciate your time. That's Cam Guthrie, Mayor of Guelph, Ontario. Mayors across Ontario have some questions about the provincial government's plan to pay for efficiency reviews and what it could mean for their bottom lines. Today, Premier Doug Ford said the reviews are needed to help the province tackle its $11.7 billion deficit and its debt that sits at around $347 billion. But the offer to pay for third-party audits comes as municipalities and school boards have been warning that provincial cuts will mean layoffs and service reductions or could force tax hikes. So how will this plan work? Is the province looking to balance the books on the backs of municipal taxpayers? Stephen Lecce is an Ontario Progressive Conservative MPP and the parliamentary assistant to Premier Doug Ford. He joins us now from Toronto. Hi, Mr. Lecce. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Vashi. Good to be here.
Let me start off with a logistics question. So you're going to pay, you've announced more than $7 million for third-party audits. Who does the audits? Who chooses the third party? Will it be your government or will it be the municipalities?
Yeah, so the decision, the determination to provide monies to cities across the province. These are larger cities, by the way, smaller communities, including rural communities like King Township in my riding. We announced monies for this audit and for that modernization fund some months ago. This is to enable the larger cities in the province of Ontario to reduce redundancy, improve efficiencies, and ultimately get better use of their tax dollars. We're providing an enabling investment, about $7 million, to municipalities to help them with the audit. And the Minister of Municipal Affairs and his ministry will be working with municipalities on the mechanics of how we execute that. But the principle behind the audit is to say to city governments, and it's a voluntary initiative, but we're hoping they will step forward and work with us in partnership, that there's got to be efficiencies found in municipal government. And you mentioned Mayor Tory, whom we have respect for, a partner in the province of Ontario. But in the city of Toronto, for example, over the last 10 years, has increased their budget by nearly 100% in a decade. That is absolutely unsustainable.
The city has grown as well.
Well, certainly not at the rate of
are you insinuating that
growth.
all the money that has been increased in that budget is going to waste?
I'm suggesting that the rate of growth is unsustainable in the province of Ontario. I mean, my goodness, Vashi, as you will know, as I will know, those that have households, you couldn't increase spending by 100% over 10 years. That's well above inflation. You need to have an income that's rising north of 10 or 12%. I mean, it's just not sustainable for families. And why is it the government? And I think this is the frustration for a lot of people at home. It certainly was the frustration if I look back in the last year when I knock on doors both during the election and even still as an MPP. People say, I cannot conceive that this government is delivering value for my money. There is a truth, a belief, a deeply ingrained principle by Ontarians across party lines, by the way, not just Tories, I would argue even Liberals. I had tons of Liberals at the door saying to me, this government is wasting my money, and I insist on actual value. And so the value proposition for the municipalities is, look, we found 8 cents to the dollar in savings. This is while we increased investments in healthcare. It's while we added another 700.
You know that there's going to be major dispute to the claims you're about to make about increasing investments. You've seen school boards announce that they're laying off a number of teachers, even though you promised in the campaign that there would be no jobs lost. You've seen public health dollars cut, and as a result, some addiction counseling programs being seized. There's been talk about childcare spaces, talk about other kinds of health programs like breakfast programs. I mean, they would have a hard time believing that you've increased investments.
Right, and so don't take it from me, Vashi. I mean, look at the fiscal framework. Look at our numbers. This year alone, the province of Ontario, let me dispute every single one of those claims if I could remember them, and you're welcome to remind me. Healthcare. In healthcare, we are adding north of $1 billion in new money. We're adding $200 million new dollars in home care to make healthcare more accessible in people's homes, which reduces spending.
You did cut public health, though, money by $200 million.
In the Ministry of Health, we're adding another 15,000 long-term care beds because we inherited over 30,000 shortage in the province. We already committed 6,000 that are actually being built as we speak. I mean, in mental health, we've already allocated significant funds, and this week alone, there will be new monies flowing in the province of Ontario to deal with addictions and mental health issues, an issue near and dear to my family's heart. I mean, with great respect to those that suggest reductions in spending, when in virtually every single area, from long-term care for our seniors to mental health for our most vulnerable, to those who are trying to get quality health care without having to have the indignity of being in a hallway, we are adding money every step of the way. In education, $700 million more money increased and spent this year on education.
That's a tiny increase, though. You know that. You know that school boards are saying, the Peel region is saying they're having to lose 369 teachers. 121 for North District School Board. The Toronto District School Board says it needs to fire 260 elementary teachers and 800 high school teachers. Your party campaigned on a promise that no one would lose their job.
And so, it's very fair to raise those points. I've heard those numbers as well. I'm just simply looking you in the eyes and the people watching, tens of thousands of viewers across this country, particularly in Ontario, saying that in September of this year, there will not be involuntary layoffs for your teachers. All of this hysteria around our education system, I think, really does a disservice to our students.
Are you saying the school boards are lying?
I'm suggesting that in September, what I promise, what the Premier has said in the legislature, is that there will not be the layoffs as proposed by the unions. And perhaps we have different interpretation of what's going to happen. I'm not going to challenge their motives. I'm saying to you that it's not going to happen. The Premier has said that, the Minister of Finance said that, the Minister of Education. Why would we expend such capital if we didn't believe so strongly that in September classrooms we're going to continue to have the educators that they need to ensure young people have a modern education and ultimately able to compete in a modern workforce? The premise of the New Democrats and Liberals is that they want to really just say anything but the facts, because the numbers in our budget speak volumes. We are increasing spending.
Those are the school boards
and with respect,
those numbers, right?
And with respect to those boards, many of whom have raised with us, including myself as a member, the concerns of the quality of the facilities our students are being housed in, are being educated in. Many of them are derelict, these schools. Some of them are in very bad shape. We're adding a net investment, $13 billion over the next decade to build new schools. Remember, the former Liberal government under McGuinty and Wynne closed 600 schools in Ontario. We're adding money to build new ones, but we're also adding them to refurbish and retrofit existing schools. We're putting $200 new dollars, again, and this is all in the budget. Don't take my word for it, folks. Please go to our budget.
I get what you're saying. The infrastructure money is there. Those school boards are saying that there won't be enough teachers to fill those schools. I want to move on, though, because I do want to ask about the money for cities, because what we've heard from people like the Mayor of Guelph, who we had on earlier on the show, like Mayor Tory, is They're looking at some of the decisions and the cuts that your government has made around, for example, let's take public health as a typical example. They're saying your government is saying we're simply changing the balance of who ends up paying for this, right? And over a period of time. They're saying this is downloading by stealth. Mayor Tory has written to your government and said, let's just be reasonable. Press pause for a second. Lots of these big cities have passed, many smaller ones too, have passed their budgets. Let's sit down. We get that there is this giant deficit and that there needs to be cuts. There needs to be some way of dealing with that deficit. Can we not press pause, work together, and implement them for the next budget? Is that not a reasonable request?
So you said downloading, which is a fascinating word, given that the province of Ontario, for the first time, certainly in my recollection, please correct me if I'm wrong, is uploading the TTC with multi-billion-dollar costs associated, moving it from the municipal government to the provincial budget and on our books. We're adding billions of dollars to get people moving in the city of Toronto. I was at that announcement.
I'm asking you about public health. That's a different.
I appreciate that, but you're talking. I totally appreciate that, Vashi. I'm not trying to be evasive. I just want to be clear. When you say download, one of the major announcements we made in Toronto was an upload of the TTC that's going to help regionalize the way we look at our subway expansions to actually help reduce congestion, which is a critical issue.
It's also dependent on federal funding that has not yet been committed. So.
And we're calling on the Fed to stop stalling. And as you know, the Prime Minister likes to throw shots on this. He has an opportunity to move the yardstick forward to get people moving, and he's been silent, which I think is an abdication of leadership.
Okay, but what about the reasonable request? Is it not reasonable for Mayor Tory for you guys to just, instead of all of this stuff happening at once their budgets have already been set out, just wait a little bit, work with them, and get to the place you need to be for the next?
And so I was at AMO, I was at Roma, for Rural Ontario. These are the associations the municipal governments have to advocate on their behalf. We've been clear from the beginning. This goes back to the late summer when the Premier spoke to AMO, the Association of Ontario Municipalities, or the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and he made clear, every one of us, not just the province of Ontario, but all governments at all levels have to do their part to live within their means. The position by a variety of mayors is that we should defer the problem. And this is a constant refrain of politicians. And
I don't think it's defer the problem. It's let's not cut all this money from public health that will affect people and their breakfast programs right away. Let's wait and figure out the way in which we can cut this money for the least impact.
Well, you mentioned breakfast programs. Let me again suggest that there are no reduction in the breakfast program. The Minister of Community and Social Services has suggested that continues to be funded unimpeded. But just with respect to the request is essentially to delay the problem, maybe defer, to delay the problem until another fiscal year. And for people at home, when you know, like in Ontario, that when we came into power, we inherited a province with a $15 billion deficit. We are spending $40 million more per day than we take in. At least we were when we came into power. The number's gone down. If the solution is to defer and delay these inevitable decisions that must be made, then I think that's an abdication of leadership. Look, the fact is, municipal governments, like every government, could find savings. 4 cents to the dollar is rather small. But you're not asking them to
just find. I have to go because I'm out of time. But I'm just saying, you're not asking them for 4 cents on the dollar. You've already said, here's all the cuts. Now find another 4 cents.
No, it's actually a voluntary initiative what we've announced. We've given them funding today to encourage them to return, to reduce those inefficiencies. And look, in the city of Toronto, you mentioned it, they've increased their spending by 100% in 10 years.
I know, you told us already.
But the Auditor General, but to be fair, in the context of that, Vashi, the Auditor General gave 200 proposals to find greater efficiencies, reduce duplication. Not one has been initiated. So I would argue now is the time to act. Now is the time to find savings for the taxpayer. And I think every person in the city of Toronto, across Ontario, is saying, yes, government of all stripes could do more with less.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lecce. Really appreciate your time today. That's Stephen Lecce, Parliamentary Assistant to Premier Doug Ford. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.